Before we begin, make sure to follow and support Delta History for more intense battlefield stories, military analysis, and frontline combat reports from around the world. The battle began before sunrise. Thick fog covered the ruined tree lines and shattered roads somewhere along the Eastern Front, where exhausted Russian assault units were preparing for another push toward a strategically important position held by international fighters supporting Ukrainian defenses. For days, artillery fire had pounded the area without pause. Burned vehicles littered the roads, abandoned trenches cut through muddy ground, and every movement near the front line carried the constant threat of drones, mortars, or sniper fire. Russian commanders believed the defenders were weakened after continuous shelling. Reconnaissance drones had spotted limited movement inside the defensive zone, and intercepted communications suggested ammunition shortages among the defending force. Confident that resistance was collapsing, several Russian assault groups were ordered to advance quickly through a narrow forest corridor and seize the remaining trenches before reinforcements could arrive. But what Russian troops did not realize was that the silence ahead was deliberate. Hidden among destroyed bunkers, collapsed tree lines, and camouflaged fighting positions were experienced international volunteers from multiple countries. Many of them were veterans with combat experience from previous wars and military service. They had spent the entire night preparing layered ambush positions, carefully studying drone footage and predicting exactly where the Russian assault teams would move. The defenders knew they could not win through numbers alone. Russian forces had superior artillery support and a larger reserve nearby. Their only chance was to allow the assault units to move deeper into the kill zone before unleashing concentrated fire at extremely close range. Every fighter understood the risk. Once the ambush began, retreat would be nearly impossible. The coming fight would happen at distances so short that reaction time alone could determine survival. As dawn slowly broke, the first Russian assault elements moved forward. Small infantry teams advanced cautiously through damaged trenches, while motorcycles and armored vehicles waited farther behind. Drones hovered overhead, searching for signs of movement. At first, everything appeared quiet. No incoming fire, no visible defenders. The silence convinced Russian troops that the bombardment had succeeded. Then the first explosion shattered the calm. A hidden anti-tank mine detonated beneath the lead vehicle near the forest entrance, instantly blocking the narrow path behind the advancing infantry. Before the smoke even settled, machine gun fire erupted from multiple concealed positions along both sides of the trench line. Tracer rounds cut through the fog as grenades exploded in rapid succession across the corridor. The ambush had begun. Russian soldiers immediately attempted to return fire, but confusion spread within seconds. The attackers could not clearly identify where the defenders were positioned. Gunfire came from underground bunkers, shattered concrete ruins, and hidden fighting holes dug beneath fallen trees. International fighters moved carefully between firing points, avoiding direct exposure while maintaining constant pressure on the trapped assault groups. One section of Russian infantry attempted to flank the defenders through a nearby trench system, but they walked directly into another prepared position. A barrage of rifle fire and grenade launches forced them back into the open ground, where drones overhead guided additional mortar strikes onto their retreat path. The battlefield quickly descended into brutal close-quarters combat. At some points, fighters were separated by only a few meters. Gunfire echoed through narrow trenches, while smoke and dust reduced visibility to almost nothing. Commands were shouted over explosions. Wounded soldiers crawled for cover as both sides struggled to maintain control of the chaotic front line. The international volunteers relied heavily on coordination. Drone operators relayed Russian movements in real time, while small assault teams repositioned constantly to avoid artillery retaliation. Some defenders deliberately allowed Russian troops to move closer before opening fire, maximizing the effect of every burst of ammunition. Others used suppressed rifles and hidden escape tunnels between trench sections to confuse advancing units about the true size of the defending force. Despite the shock of the ambush, Russian commanders pushed more troops forward in an attempt to overwhelm the defenders through sheer pressure. Additional assault groups entered the corridor, unaware that the lead units had already become trapped. The narrow terrain soon became overcrowded with infantry, damaged vehicles, and wounded personnel trying to retreat through the same limited access routes. That was exactly what the defenders had planned. Mortar teams waiting behind the main line suddenly opened fire with devastating precision. Explosions tore through the rear approach, isolating the assault units inside the engagement zone. Drone footage later showed smoke columns rising above the forest while scattered Russian troops attempted to reorganize under constant fire. Still, the fighting did not stop. Several Russian soldiers managed to reach portions of the frontline trenches, triggering fierce hand-to-hand encounters inside cramped defensive positions. Rifles fired at nearly point-blank range. Grenades bounced off muddy trench walls before detonating in confined spaces. Every meter of ground became contested. Fighters on both sides experienced the terrifying reality of modern trench warfare, where survival depended not only on firepower, but also endurance, discipline, and the ability to react instantly under pressure. As the battle intensified, international fighters used small drone-dropped explosives to target Russian reinforcements attempting to regroup behind the front. Some assault teams became completely cut off from communication after electronic warfare disrupted radio signals across the area. Without clear coordination, Russian movements became fragmented, making it even harder to break through the defensive network. Meanwhile, artillery continued pounding the surrounding area. Trees splintered apart from repeated shell impacts. Shockwaves shook the trenches. Dirt and debris rained down over exhausted fighters who had already been engaged in combat for hours. Yet despite the relentless pressure, the defending force held its positions. One international fighter later described the battle as pure survival, explaining that visibility was so poor during parts of the clash that soldiers sometimes identified enemies only by footsteps or shadows moving through smoke-filled trenches. Another volunteer recalled hearing drones constantly overhead while trying to reload magazines under incoming fire. Every second felt stretched between chaos and silence. After nearly half an hour of continuous combat, the Russian assault finally began losing momentum. Ammunition shortages, mounting casualties, blocked retreat routes, and relentless defensive fire forced surviving units to pull back from the corridor. Smoke covered the battlefield as damaged vehicles burned near the tree line and scattered infantry attempted to evacuate the wounded under drone surveillance. But even during the retreat, danger remained everywhere. Defenders continued targeting movement along escape routes, while artillery strikes landed dangerously close to withdrawing troops. The battlefield that Russian commanders expected to capture within minutes had instead become a deadly trap. By midday, the fighting had largely subsided. The forest corridor was left devastated. Craters covered the ground, destroyed equipment remained abandoned across the battlefield, and both sides suffered losses during the brutal engagement. Yet strategically, the defenders had succeeded. The Russian assault failed to secure the position, and the international fighters managed to hold the line despite overwhelming pressure. The battle demonstrated once again how modern warfare is increasingly shaped by small unit coordination, drones, prepared defensive networks, and close-range engagements that can erupt with terrifying speed. Technology played a major role, but so did preparation, terrain knowledge, and the willingness of soldiers to hold positions under impossible conditions. For the international volunteers, the battle was another reminder that survival on the front line often depends on seconds, instincts, and teamwork. For the attacking force, it became a costly lesson about advancing into unfamiliar terrain against defenders who were prepared for every possible route of attack. And although the clash lasted less than 30 minutes, the violence and intensity of those moments would remain burned into the memories of everyone who survived it. Thank you for watching Delta History. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more detailed military stories, frontline battle coverage, and modern warfare analysis.